Well, hey everybody, my name is Reid. I'm part of the team at Hillsong Church Australia, and today I'm really excited to be with you at FILO conference and do a session on mixing monitors. I've been part of the team since about 2005. I started out as a monitor engineer, and I've been on full-time staff since 2010. I really love the message of FILO. I really love the mission of FILO, which is to help technical artists in the local church to become more effective so they can help their local churches become more effective. I really love the idea that ultimately we're here to serve our local church, to serve the people coming to church every week, and I love what this conference is about. Okay, in order to succeed at anything, we have to start by defining what success looks like. I think the goal of our monitor engineers is to serve our church by delivering monitor mixes to the platform team that enable them to focus on leading the congregation in worship. I think our platform teams carry a massive responsibility. They need to stand on a stage like this and focus on leading the whole room in connecting with Jesus. My goal as an engineer is to help them focus on people, help them focus on delivering the music well. Ideally, they don't have to think about their monitor mixes. They're not worried about whether or not they're going to hear the right keyboard when they need to pitch off of. Ideally, our music director doesn't have to worry about whether or not they're going to hear the worship leader in each moment of the service. My goal is that I take that pressure off of them so they can focus on leading people. I think a huge factor in success at mixing monitors is actually people skills. The team on stage need to know that I'm friendly and here to help them succeed. They need to be convinced that their goals are my goals. So when I turn up in the morning, I try to say hi to people. I try to welcome the band. I try to be friendly as you're giving out packs or setting up your console. Say hello. I look at Planning Center or my rostering system, and I look at who's on. I try to know people's name. I try not to refer to people as drums or second keys or vocal 7. I try to know their names as Joe or Tom or Susie or Karen or whatever it is. If I'm mixing for like a guest band at like a conference or something, I'll actually like do a cheat sheet with everybody's name, again, so I can say their name, not just stage left guitar. You know, the best monitor engineers I know seem to have this freakish ability to take their head and be inside every single person's head in the room. You know, they have this ability to sit back at the monitor console and understand the way the worship leader is perceiving that moment, to be able to see the room and the surroundings the way that worship leader does so that they can give the worship leader what they need musically in terms of mix to lead the service. They can understand the way the music director is perceiving the room and take the music director's likes and dislikes in terms of mix and then translate that. It's an unbelievable ability, and if you can practice that, challenge yourself to go, how is Susan, our worship leader? How is Terry, the drummer? How are they perceiving? What is their perspective on this moment? It'll really help you be a better monitor engineer. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do to succeed is prepare. I think musical preparation is so important. In order to deliver monitor mixes that empower our platform team to lead the service, we need to know the arrangements and plan for fader movements that are ahead of the game. For instance, maybe if we're playing the song Sinking Deep, that starts with a whole bunch of piano for like the first verse and chorus, right? I'm going to have my piano fader ready to go, and I'm pushing that sometimes as much as 5 dB. I guess I kind of learned that the hard way when I'd be frustrated where three songs into rehearsal, everybody all of a sudden needs more piano. And eventually it kind of light bulb moment, and I realized, the only thing playing in the first half of this song is the piano. So I just push up that fader, give everybody a little more piano, and everyone's like, this sounds great. I think the same thing applies to various different parts. And the song No Other Name starts with a guitar hook, and it's a lot of guitar often for the first verse. So I know I need to push the guitar for everybody. I've also learned to translate this in like rhythm segments, right? So there'll be moments where like, in the song Wake by Young and Free, there's the bridge where it all comes way down and there's not much happening in the bridge, right, for the singer to sing with. So I learned that often the singer needs some extra click in that moment so they can sing along. Again, get your head around the arrangements before you turn up to mix on a Sunday, and you'll better be positioned to give the musicians what they need in their mix so that they can deliver well and focus on, again, leading people, not worrying about whether or not their mix is going to give them what they need to hear. All right, next thing I do with prep. I think gain structure is so important. Like, I can't just say enough about how important gain structure is. Today, I'm going to be using an Allen & Heath Avantis. I'm listening on my UE7s. I use a Neve RNHP for our wired musicians, so I'm going to listen through one of those. I think gain structure is really important. I can't say that enough. So I'll spend a lot of time when I'm building a console or a new audio package making sure that the wireless in-ears are set up to the same level as the hardwired in-ears. So like if I plug into a wired headphone amp and I put it to noon, midway, and then I plug into the same wireless system we're using for the singers, and put that to about midway, I want them to be as close to the same volume as I can get so that when I'm at the monitor console scrolling through mixes, it's all pretty close and level. And then I tell everybody on stage, you guys start at about noon, and I'm actually listening a little bit quieter than that. If it sounds nice and loud to me on 4.5, they're going to be happy on about 5. Again, my goal is to have all the mixes leaving my console at about the same volume. That doesn't always happen. The drummer's mix with click is basically always the loudest, but I do work hard at having consistent gain structure. The other thing you need to make sure you do in prep is you need to have all your inputs and outputs labeled. Well before the band turns up, you want to line check all the inputs and out. You want to send tone to all the in-ears. You want to know this stuff is working before the band gets on stage. So the next thing we'll do is I'll actually show you how I dial in a console and how I prep mixes. And again, this is all stuff I do before I'm making noise, before the band walks on stage. So let's look at the console. Okay, so here we are at the console that I've started prepping. So all the channel faders are down, everything, all the inputs are labeled, all the outputs are labeled. I have some user-defined keys over here set up for fader flip. On this first bank, I have drums, bass, click, and our music director. On this second page, I have guitars, keys, acoustic, and most of the vocals. And over on my right, I have some DCAs and effects send and all the vocal mics. And over on the bottom bank, I have all the outputs should I need them. I can quickly fader flip through each mix, and I can unflip there. First thing I like to do is I will dial in levels. So I'm going to fader flip to the drummer's mix. So I basically like to start with, I work out what the me input is, so everybody's me input. So for the drummer, I refer to the click as their me input. So the click's nice and loud in the drummer's mix. If we go to the bass player's mix, the 2 bass channels are at unity for the bass player. If I go to the guitarist's mix, his guitar channels are at -5. He's got 2 of those. If I go to the second guitarist mix, his guitars are at -5. If I go to the keyboards, the keys 1's keyboard is at 0. Keys 2 keyboard is at 0. And as I go through each vocal mic, their vocal is at -5, and the other lead vocal is at about -15, and then all the BV mics are way down from there. That's vocal 3's mix, 4's, and 5's. So I like to get some rough levels set up. So I put the me input somewhere around unity to -5, depending on what it is, and I put all the other inputs in that mix at about -10. I run everything goes post to everyone, except I set up vocals pre to self. So I have those over on this bank. So if we fader flip vocal 1, it's pre to themselves, but the other ones are post. Vocal 2 is pre to self. So I will actually sound check a vocal mic before I hand it to any singers. I've sound checked a vocal mic. I've listened to it in my ears. I have a rough level set up so that when we start vocal sound check, they can definitely hear themselves, but nobody else hears them until I push up the fader. Eventually, I may make a bunch of more inputs pre to self, but I don't start out that way. I think a really important workflow when you hit sound check is that you slowly fade up each input as you set gain. They're faders for a reason. I would have some basic EQ dialed into my show file, especially if it's like a running show file that I use all the time. So before I start, I have a rough idea of what I'm going to do with, let's kick in, kick out, snare top, bottom, hats, toms, bass, so on and so forth. I try to have as much ready so that when I hit sound check, I'm ready to go. Some people love using DCAs, some people don't. I'm a fan of DCAs, and it changes from event to event to what I'm doing. I mentioned earlier that I do some inputs pre to self. So I've got a tom DCA and a cymbal DCA. So I'll put drums pre to self, and if the drummer's smashing the cymbals, I can pull down a cymbal DCA. Or if they're just tap, 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 tap away, I can just push up the cymbals a little bit. Sometimes I'll have one for tracks, so on and so forth. This session doesn't have any ambience mic, so I've got a reverb kind of mimicking what ambience might do. Before I start any rehearsal, I sound check the MD mic and all the talkback mics. I want to make sure we can communicate as a team before we start. And that is the gist of console prep. Okay, so you're ready to start a sound check. Like I said earlier, you want to be friendly and approachable, so say hi to people. I think we've probably heard this over and over again, so I'm going to say it over and over again. Good sounds start at the source. On our team, the front of house engineer is responsible for mic placement on all the various drums and guitars and stuff, but definitely, you need to look at mic placement. That's the key to getting it sound good, along with, of course, the instrument sounding good. So I'd encourage you to get your drummers in earlier so they can tune the drums. Maybe midweek, find time to work with the guitarists on their sound. Again, if you can get the sound sounding good at the source, the less you do with them, the better. Your EQ and compression and all of that becomes about putting stuff together, not about fixing problems. I don't think I can fix problems at a sound desk. I can try, but it always works out better if we fix things at the source. So before I start, I will always, and I guess because I'm kind of in production management, my team hears this from me all the time, we always sound check the not music stuff first. I don't want to get to the end of a rehearsal and find out, oh, I haven't sound checked playbacks, or maybe your church links for some of your preaching, right? I don't want to know that. I don't want to get to 10 minutes before the service, right as we're opening doors, and oh, did we check the link? We check our preaching mics. Like the very first thing our team does when they come in is we make sure the PA works, and then we're sound checking the MC microphones. We're ringing them out in the wedges. We're making sure our pastor's mic is going to sound good. All those little details, if there's a problem, I want to know about that with 2 hours before the service starts, not 10 minutes before the service starts. Let's get into the console. Okay, we're going to make some noise. We're going to sound check drums. On our team, we do kick, snare, hats together, so I'm going to kind of work in that workflow. The reason we do kick, snare, hats together is so that if the front of house guy wants to spend a little more time on kick, or the monitor engineer wants to spend a little more time on snare, we've got time to do that. A big thing I'm going to note, though, is that the overhead mics are part of the drum kit. They're not just cymbal mics, they're doing the whole thing. So I listen to those with kick, snare, hats. All right, so here's my first kick mic. This is the 901. I'm using this to give me like a tack. I want to make it click through. It's often called the click drum. High pass filter, just getting rid of some bottom end I don't need. I don't use gates a lot at monitors. Here's my EQ. So I'm just getting rid of some of the 1K stuff that I don't really need. And I'm adding in some top end. I just want to make it poke through a little bit more. Sometimes I end up like getting rid of some of the metaliness, but we'll see how we go. So far, I haven't done that. In terms of compression, my compression strategy isn't that I would hit anything really hard. I just want to have a little bit of protection in case something gets out of hand later in the service. So that's the 901. Let's have a listen to the 52. So I'm using the Beta 52 to give me the doof, to give me the beef. Using two mics means that I can give people a different blend depending on the need, or depending on what's happening with the PA, how much bottom end is looming around the room, I can kind of tailor the kick sound to my needs. So I'm not high pass filtering that. Maybe I would add some low pass or some high pass later, but for the moment I'm not gonna high pass that. Again, I'm not gating it. Let's look at some EQ. So I'm pulling out some mids and beefing up the bottom end a little bit. And then compression, again, same deal. I just have a little bit of, it's about 3 dB. Sometimes it does a little bit more than that, but my goal is just to put some protection. And that's the two together. Okay, so anytime you have two sources at the same time, you really need to think about polarity. Are the two sources in phase, which two microphones rarely are. So I'm just going to hit the polarity button. And instantly it sounds fatter. Polarity out. So now I've put the 52, I've reversed the 52. Again, anytime you have two mics on the same source, just play with the phase both ways and see what sounds better to you. Okay, let's add some snare. So right now, I'm actually going to wind in the high-pass filter a little more. Again, don't really mess with gates. Here's the EQ, so I'm pulling out some kind of low mids, and I'm just brightening up the top end a little bit. Compressor, I have a compressor dialed in. Again, it's not doing heaps. It's just if they get really excited later, there's a little bit of control on it. Let's add snare bottom next. So my personal approach to snare bottom is let's start with the compressor. So that's what I'm looking for snare bottom to do. I want to get all the rattles. So I do a fast attack, a fast release, and again, I'm just looking to hear all those ghost notes. And if you put them together, let's go back to polarity, again, really important. Again, because I've high-pass filtered that pretty hard, you're not going to notice that as much. But I liked it better out of phase. So let's listen to kick and snare together. I'm a big believer that kick and snare should be best friends. They need to be working together. Cool. I'm going to add the hi-hat. So hi-hat. Again, I get rid of a whole heap of bottom end. I've high-passed to 500. I'm going to pull that compressor way back because I don't need that. All right, so that's the hi-hat. Let's listen to the overheads. So as I push up each channel fader, I would be setting gain, but this is a virtual sound check, so my gain is in my trim. So if I felt like I needed more or less, I would just trim things up and down, but normally I'd be turning an analog preamp knob. All right, so that's kind of where I want to start with kick, snare, hats, and overheads. I'm just going to jump to a loop of toms. I always find toms are the tricky thing to sound check in a virtual sound check. So we would normally just go tom, 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 one at a time. So I don't get too aggressive with the high-pass filter. I want to leave the tom sounding nice and big. I've got a compressor in line in case he gets excited, but not doing heaps to it. Let's listen to the second tom. Before I started, when I built the file, I panned things around. All right, and let's put the whole drum kit together. So this is panned per the drummer's perspective. And then if we just quickly scroll through some other mixes, so that's the drummer's faders. That's the bass player, he's got less drums. Guitarist, keyboards. So we'll stop that there. So that's drums basically sound checked. I'm ready to put drums into a song. The next thing we'll listen to is some bass guitar. So for the sake, normally they would do this by themselves, so I'll just pull the faders down. I'm going to solo the bass player's mix before I listen to bass. And I'm going to go back to the top of this song, and we'll listen to some bass. So I'm listening to the bass player's mix. I select the bass guitar, and I'm going to slowly push up that fader. So again, his mix level's already dialed in. I'm just going to fade this up. So at this point, I would be turning a gain knob, but I don't have one, so I'm going to, I've got a trim there, and I kind of roughly dialed that in before I started. Okay, it's a high-pass filter. I want to leave that bass guitar sounding nice and fat. I've gotten rid of some top-end stuff that I just don't need. That's my EQ. I'm not doing anything to it. This is an awesome sounding bass. Sometimes if a bass doesn't sound great, I'll actually add some mid-range, but I didn't need to do that with this guy. All right, so let's look at the compressor. I'm aiming to do about 3 dB of compression, so I'm just going to back that off a little bit. Again, I'm not trying to take away their dynamics. I'm just doing a little bit of protection in case things get out of hand later. Attack and release, not too fast, but I sped up the release a little bit, and the compressor is set to 4:1. Okay, let's have a listen to their second channel. So this is a dirty channel, bass 2. So I'm primarily using the main input, but again, I've got the second input here, so let's have a listen. So that's just adding some fuzz. So I mentioned polarity earlier. It's this is 1. These should be in phase, but we'll have a listen. It's always a good thing to do is to check polarity. Yeah. So the sources sound in phase to me. So that's bass guitar setup. Again, if I scroll through mixes, everybody else has a bit less. That's bass mix, guitar mix, drums, bass, guitar. Cool. Okay, so next I would sound check the electric guitars. Okay, let's look at some guitars. So, stereo guitars are kind of complicated, and if you're going to put more than one mic on a guitar amp, you really need to get it right. So the way I do it with 2 electrics on stage is everybody but the drummer takes only one of each guitarist's channel. So for example, the drummer has guitar 1's left channel panned hard left and guitar 2's right channel panned hard right. Same for bass, same for keys, same for the vocals, right? The first guitarist has both of their channels panned hard left and right, and again, they only have one of the other guitar channels. Second guitarist has both of their channels panned hard left and right and only one of their channels. If you take 2 of the same guitar line and pan them right up the middle or pan them on top of each other, hard left or hard right, they will be out of phase, they will sound terrible and phase coherent. There's no value add. I guess you could spend a whole bunch of time with delay getting them perfectly in time, but I don't think there's a benefit there. So 2 guitar lines means hard panning them. So let's have a bit of a listen. Again, I am listening to that guitarist's mix when I sound check them. Let's have a listen. So this is their left channel. So, bit of a high-pass filter. I'm not EQing this at all because it already sounds awesome. Again, get things sounding great at the source. Move microphones, all that kind of stuff. Here's compression. A lot of overdrive pedals are compressing guitars a fair bit anyway, so I find I don't need compression with guitars. There's something there, but it's not doing anything. Let's listen to the other channel. Again, I would be setting gain on this to get my faders where I need them, but this is a virtual sound check. So that's the second channel. Again, it's hard right in that guitarist's ears. Okay, so next is a little trick that some people love and some people hate. So I've got 4 milliseconds of delay on the inside fader. Let's have a listen to them together. So that's with the delay off. With a little bit of delay, it just makes it sound wider. Some guitarists love that, some guitarists hate it, so see how you go. But that's what I do with guitars. I'm not doing much to that. It's just pan nice and wide. And if I listen to it in a few mixes, cool. All right, let's listen to the other guitarist. So I'm going to listen to in their mix. So again, levels were all dialed in before I started, so this is just about setting gain and listening to EQ and dynamics. I actually want to brighten up the left side a little bit. Just going to brighten that up. Let's have a listen again. So let's listen to this passage with both guitars together. This is in the keyboard player's mix. Going into the chorus. So that's what I do with electric guitars. Okay, so again, I'm mimicking a sound check situation, so I'll turn those off. We kind of sound check one thing at a time. I'm going to listen to first keyboard player. So again, I'm listening to their input and their mix as I dial in the levels. I find often keyboards I actually need to brighten them. Compression. So I've got a compressor dialed in. Again, it's not doing anything yet. It's just ready to go in case things get out of hand. Cool. All right, let's listen to the second keyboard. So this keyboard has a fair bit of like low mid in it. So I'm just going to do that, kind of create some more space for other stuff. And I might brighten it too. But keyboard's pretty straightforward. Again, compressor's dialed in case things get out of control, but it's not really doing anything. Okay, so at this point in a sound check, we've listened to each band element. We would then sound check the click. We would have already sound checked the music director's mic and they would have been talking, but this is a recording. So, look, the click often ends up pretty loud in the drummer's mix. For today's exercise, I'll probably turn the click down a little bit so that everybody can hear more of what we're listening to. I know I don't love listening to super loud click, but let's have a listen and we'll get the click dial down around real quick. Again, when I built mixes, the drummer's taking the click at Unity. So when I set up the me input, I don't actually make the drummer's me input the drums. I make the drummer's me input the click. So that's the thing. I build my mix around assuming that's going to be the loudest thing. All right, so unflipped. And at this point, I have the click set up, and I'd be looking across stage, and we'd get the gain set with the drummer happy with my channel fader at Unity, and then everybody else would ask me for it up and down. It's kind of the only input that people give us feedback immediately in soundcheck. The rest of it, they kind of trust us to build mixes, and they talk to us after a song. So here we go. So again, I'm listening to the drummer's mix. I'll start that there, and we'll listen to the MD next.
Swell into mighty, roll track, mighty to save, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so processing on an MD mic.
Solid wash.
I'm going to get rid of a whole bunch of bottom end I don't need.
Roll track, mighty to save, 2, 3, 4.
Some people will, some people would low pass the MD mic to get rid of some of the cymbal bleed. I find that just destroys the diction of their microphone, so I don't do that because I find it doesn't help me.
To save, 2, 3, 4. Wash on the 1. Solid wash. And we'll swell into mighty, roll track, mighty to save.
Here's the click.
2, 3.
Okay, cool. So at this point, we've done our sound check. I'm going to reopen up all the inputs. I don't mute stuff in between, like sound checking drums, bass, guitar, keys. I've just done that for the sake of this environment. So our worship leader is an acoustic, so we're going to say for the sake of this exercise, we haven't sound checked the acoustic because the worship leader's off stage and a vocal warm-up still at this point. So we're just going to put the band inputs together. So when I'm running through the band inputs, the first thing I'm doing is I want to get them comfortable on stage as fast as I can. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll through each mix, and I'm going to make sure everybody has a good sense of time and a good sense of me. If they have got enough time to play along properly, and they can hear themselves, I'm going to move on to the next mix, and then I'll come back to more things in their mix. Can they hear the other elements? All right, here we go. All right, drummer can hear click, and drummer can hear all his inputs. So I'm moving on to bass. Okay, the bass player can hear himself. He can hear the other stuff, so he's okay for the moment. Here's some guitar. Okay. I don't reckon that guitar's okay. I think he needs more of himself. Just going to bring that up a little bit. I'm just going to roll that from the top. All right, that guitar's okay. And then this guitar doesn't play that verse. We'll move on to keyboards. They can hear themselves in time, they're good. Let's move on. Keys 2. Yep, they can hear a bit of time in themselves, so they're good. Okay, cool. So I've done a quick pass. Everybody can hear themselves in time. The next thing I'm going to do is literally just go massage mixes a bit so they can hear the rest of the band nicely. So I'm going to keep working. Again, I'd have about one song with just the band. Okay, so as I did my last pass, one thing I noticed is that the bass guitar has plenty of themselves, maybe a touch loud, but it's too quiet for everybody else. So here's what I'm going to do. As you watch me, I'm going to slowly, I'm actually going to gain it up at the compressor output, and I am going to pull the faders down for the bass player. The net result is that everybody on stage gets more bass, and I'm going to do it in such a way that the bass player hopefully doesn't even notice. All right, I'm happy with bass there. Okay, so at this point, the band would all give me some feedback with some mix changes they'd want. I'd tweak some mixes, and then we would sound check the vocals. So we're going to talk about sound checking vocals. So in our vocal sound check, it would just be singers and piano, maybe some click, maybe a little bit of hats. So I'm going to jump into that. Again, this is all pre-recorded. Vocals are pre to self, so as soon as a worship leader picks up their microphone, they can hear it. So let's have a listen. As soon as I get the lead vocal happening in their ears, I push up their channel fader so that I can be really confident that the band has a good level of the lead vocal. But the first thing I do is get them comfortable in their own ears. So I'm going to solo vocal ones mix.
He can move a mountain. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation.
Okay, so vocal, I've got a bit of a high pass filter dialed in. There, I'm just adding some brightness, pulling out like some 220. It's the classic Beta 58 thing. I've got a compressor dialed in, but it's not really doing anything.
He can move a mountain.
Again,
My God.
these guys really need to hear the dynamics. So I've got a compressor in with the threshold wound out. If somebody gets out of control, there's a compressor there to protect everybody else, but I'm not really doing much with it. Let's have a listen.
He can move a mountain. My God is mighty to save.
So at this point, I would jump to the band's mixes and add that lead vocal. Now, because they're pre to self, I don't have to go all the way to unity. I can just get it there and then see how it sits in a song later. Let's listen to the other vocals.
He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. And we worship the powerful.
All right, we'll go to vocal 3.
He can move the mountains.
Again, they're all pre to
My
self.
God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save.
Same EQ.
Forever,
I pulled out some bottom end.
author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave.
And we'll listen to vocal 4, solo their mix. They're all pre to self.
He can move the mountain. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. As Jesus conquered the grave.
All right, and we'll listen to vocal 5.
He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation.
Cool, and we shall listen to vocal 6.
He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave.
Okay, so this next part of rehearsal will run the whole song together with everybody. The people getting my first priority attention is the worship leaders, and then I'm going to listen to the rest of the vocals, and then I'm going to listen to how it all sounds in the band's mix. Our team's pretty patient, and they get that kind of the band's had a whole song for me to give them my attention. So next, I'm just focusing on vocals. This wouldn't necessarily be the same song, but I'm using the same song for the sake of this this exercise. All right, we're listening to the lead vocal mix.
Everyone needs compassion, a love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me. Everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of the Savior. The hope of the nation.
Straight build the bridge. Build to the instrumental. Straight build the bridge. Solid build here.
Yes, he is. Forever.
Up chorus. That's a big.
So at that point in rehearsal, I would be getting feedback from everybody on stage, one at a time. We'd go through and we'd go vocal 1, vocal 2, vocal 3, and they'd ask me to turn a few things up, turn a few things down, piano a few things here and there. But hopefully, at that point, hopefully it's starting to come together. All right, everybody. Well, I hope that sounded all right. I hope it kind of made sense. Again, I'm listening on my UE7s via a Neve headphone amp, which is what I use for hardwired musicians, just off the console. I hope that the streaming platform, whatever we're using, Vimeo or YouTube or whatever that is, doesn't just destroy the dynamics. But I hope the workflow makes sense. I hope it's helpful. I know we're going to do some Q&A later, so I look forward to chatting some more. When we hit the actual service, what I'm doing is I'm making sure that everybody can hear the right lead singer, whoever's leading that song. So the channel fader for the lead vocal generally sits around 0, and then I pull back the person not leading the song back to neg 10 or so, depending on the moment. If we're at at like a conference environment where there's like one person who is very much leading the service, but different people are leading every song, I normally leave like the senior worship leader up at Unity, so that if they ever need to take the whole service in a different direction, the band, especially the music director and the drummer, can hear them really, really clearly. The other stuff I'm doing is I'm watching for parts, right? So again, I mentioned Sinking Deep earlier. If we're going to play a song like Sinking Deep, where it's loads of piano for the front half of that song, I've got that piano channel fader. Piano's pre to self. I've got that piano channel fader pushed 5, sometimes 10 dB extra. I'm sitting on the MD or worship leader's mix as I ride out how much extra everyone needs for the kind of the first half of the song. There's other moments like that. Like I learned over the years that sometime a vocalist will turn to me and say, I need more click. And they need more click, but they're not necessarily thinking about, oh, do I need more click right now? Do I just need more click the whole time? What's going on? Often they need more click right now in this moment. So I've learned that like we hit the down bridge of a song where there's no drums. Well, they're going to need extra click there. So I'm ready to sit on their mix. I give them a little bit extra click, and then I bring it back. I also I'm riding ambience mics, right? So if there's a moment with big crowd interaction, I want to subtly sneak up the ambience mics a little bit, make sure the person leading the service can hear the room. But you got to be careful with that you don't just destroy them with ambience. I also have, again, I like mixing drums pre to self. I have my cymbals, all the overhead mics, hats and overheads on a DCA. So if we're going through like a transition where the drummer is just kind of tapping away gently, I can push up the cymbals. Everybody can hear that clearly. And then we get into a chorus where they're smashing the cymbals. I can duck all the cymbals back. I often do the same with acoustic guitar. It sits pre to self for the worship leader playing acoustic, and sometimes their channel fader will be back, neg 5, neg 10. And then you get to that down chorus that's just acoustic and vocal with some hats. I'm pushing that acoustic up, sometimes 5 dB, and everyone can hear the acoustic when they need it, and then I sync that back a little bit when they don't need it. If we're doing a service with a bunch of strings, I've definitely got a strings DCA and strings pre to self. The other thing that's really, really important is like your pastor's mics, your MC mics. So in our services, they're real dynamic. And so I need to make sure that especially the worship leader and music director can hear the pastor's mic really clearly. So when they get up and we transition from praise and worship into the rest of the service, I've got my hand on that channel fader, and I'm just bringing that channel fader, I'm just moving it subtly the whole time and make sure they can hear it without it overpowering them. It's super, super critical that our team can follow the MC. Nothing's like worse than the MC says, all right, guys, let's sing that again, and the band is standing there going, what? So I make sure I nail that. Again, all of this is about serving our platform team so they can focus on serving the congregation well. I hope this is really helpful. Look forward to answering some questions soon. See you later, guys.